Now, you've heard me mention the name Israel Finkelstein, and there's Bart Ehrman's pretty famous right now. There's a camp known as minimalists, and it's fairly new, and even some of the most well-respected um, scholars of ancient history and archaeologists view them as ideologically driven and motivated to interpret the evidence in a skewed light, which you've got to be wary of. And instead of having traditional um, scholars and critical scholars when dealing with a subject like the Bible, how to view archaeology, or how to view the history that goes with it, you have this minority camp within the critical scholars that are minimalists. For example, they'll say everything in the histories of the Old Testament is fabricated, which then things like the Mesha Stela, Tel Dan inscription, um, the Egyptian inscription from Understudy the First from 1200 BC. They'll try to say forgeries. They get stuck with the Sennacherib inscription, which basically, from Sennacherib, gives Sennacherib an Assyrian point of view of the near conquest of Jerusalem. Which cities were burned, what was taken over. And it's mostly from those who want the outcome to be different than because of modern politics. They're letting modern strife and modern politics in the region of Israel Palestine to determine how they interpret the evidence. It would be like somebody saying, well, Christianity's bad for people and we don't like Christianity, so we're going to say Jesus didn't exist even though we have evidence to say that he did. Which is kind of a scumbag move to make. I'll give you an example. The Omri, the gates, the three gates. We're told in Book of Kings that Solomon built 3 fortified cities. And we found those. And they all have identical gate systems to them. Fortifications. And Israel Finkelstein comes around and says, no, those were built by Omri. Well, how can you tell? Well, it's more likely that he would have built in this style. Well, did people in the time of Solomon build gates like this? Yeah, they did. And this is the style that they would build from the time of Solomon or Omri. Well, what's your evidence? Well, it doesn't look like the style Solomon was building. What? We have a text that a historical text, which is Kings. Yes, it's in a religious book now, but it's a chronicle of people that you don't really gain any theology out of it. And we say these cities were built by this one king in this one time period, and he just so why not just say, oh well, that, yeah. But he goes the other way, and then people say, oh, he's the more critical one, he's the more skeptical one. Well, Finkelstein, no, he's not. He's seen as fringe, very fringe. There's a great interview done with Richard Elliott Friedman, the guy who wrote the Bible. It's probably the best book on documentary hypothesis. And just because, We have creation myths, flood myths. Did Abraham exist? Did Moses exist? You know, and stuff like that, or questions. But there's not really any scholar or archaeologist that'll say, oh, you know, the House of David and the ruling kings of Israel and Judah didn't exist. Because every piece of archaeology we find matches up that people with those names ruled in those time periods who claim to be of the House of David, from various various periods of history throughout that period of time, that 400-year time. Another place, I think 300 or something like that. So the minimalist position is kind of, and it's also backed up by fundamentalists, because the fundamentalists don't want to know anything about what really went down. They don't want to say, oh, there's evidence to show that the Torah was compiled by there was four different Torahs basically, and they were patched together. They don't want to find evidence because it can, you know, it might contradict their view. So they say, nope, there's no archaeology can be found in the Bible. Miracles can't be found. That's not a realm of history. Belief, whether there's a God, this isn't part of history or archaeology. But people who are influenced by either their heavily influenced, I mean, something where they would say it's worth lying to people about because of X, either because of their fundamentalist reading of scripture and complete literalism, or because of politics that have been going on, of the Israel-Palestinian conflict. And I'll see people who claim who are atheists and who are trying to claim to be skeptical, who will automatically take a minimalist side to something. And I find that to be, at the least, very creepy, but also very annoying, because history and archaeology, that's something very important to me. We can prove as much as we can know anything about history, as much as we can know World War I happened, that there was a ruler who started a dynasty named David, and these people are called from the House of David, and that there were Jehu, Joram, Josaphat, Omri, Ahab, I'm going between the two kingdoms, and especially Hezekiah. The account that we have in Kings of Sennacherib coming down, destroying Israel, the kingdom in the north, burning a lot of the cities in the south, in Judah, and almost conquering Jerusalem, but then having to pull back. In an Syrian inscription called the Sennacherib prison, we see that same account, but it's given from the point of view of Sennacherib. And we can see, we can see the Assyrian bolt heads and arrowheads in the ground, and the fire carbon dating from that time. And, you know, everything matches up. Now, what do you do with something like that? You say, yeah, Hezekiah did exist. This happened. There will be some people who will hear that and say, that means you believe in the virgin birth of Jesus Christ in the Bible as an errant. These people are atheists. They're terrified of this stuff, and actually, instead of dealing with it. That's why I do think we can apply something like the term fundamentalist atheist, because they're fundamentalist Christians gone one God less. They still can't interact with the data that's being brought forth, or they're terrified that that'll convince people that Jesus was born of a virgin and rose on the third day after being crucified. To me, that frustrates the hell out of me, because I'm like, how do you make that jump? That shows that you're illogical to begin with. But then, by that same token, if there's if you have a piece of data that may suggest, oh, this event in the Bible didn't happen, they'll be all over that and say it proves it. It's like, wait, don't you have historical standards? I don't get this. So, and I'm sure there may be minimalists out there that aren't like this, but the overwhelming amount of them that I see are it's just so frustrating. Or they'll say, well, the Bible is disproved, can't be used as history because of the flood story. When, as if the Bible is one book, as if it doesn't have multiple authors, wasn't written over hundreds, if not 1,000 years. And when we talk about the history portion of the Bible, we're not including these theodicies and myths at the beginning. We're talking about from the rise of the state of Israel in the period of the kings of Israel and Judea, and that's it. Even in Hebrew, it's known as the history. The Torah has always been separate from that, and it's very infuriating. And it's the fundamentalist Christians that are very irritating. It's also many atheists that claim to be skeptical, but they're not. They've gone beyond being skeptical. Now they're trying to reinforce an ideology. And I guess that's what's so frustrating about dealing with the history of something like the Bible. When people say, oh, it's just a myth. Well, which part? No, it's just a myth. All of it's just a myth. No, that betrays. That shows you're showing your bare ass, that you just are willfully stupid, or willfully ignorant, or just completely stupid. And I think it's time people grow up and begin to deal with this. Now, if somebody disagrees with documentary hypothesis, I'll talk to them about it. But I'm still shocked in many ways that people are acting like this. Alright, take it easy. Peace to you.